Hello and welcome to Spectrum Analysis, a thing I just made up where I, an uninformed autistic person with a film degree and a special interest in voice acting, ramble about my hyperfixations in the media. On the autopsy table today is Hazbin Hotel episodes 1 through 4. Hazbin Hotel has been released for the span that can better be measured in hours rather than days. And yet, I've been seeing spoilers about it for the past 2 days before release. Yet, luckily, I've managed to remain unspoiled until 2 p.m. on the day of writing and managed to binge-watch the first 4 25-minute episodes before tea time. It's been an interest of mine, this Hazbin Hotel thing, since the pilot aired in 2019, when a friend of mine posted a clip of Angel Dust's famous line in a Discord server, from which the wry humour drew me in to watching the pilot. I've known about Hazbin for longer, though. For years before the pilot, that same friend used to send pictures of Angel Dust's old design to me and my friends, asking if we found this spider furry hot or cute. And if anyone said yes, he'd pull out the Yu-Gi-Oh! One-liner and tell us that we were all gay wads because that was a guy. He used to do this a lot with many characters of the same fashion before both they and I finally realised that we're not as straight as we'd like to believe. And this exercise was just a way to shield ourselves from the prying eyes of high school mockery for our neurodivergence and obvious queer overtones. Personal anecdotes aside, I've been into the characters and lore for this series about 5 years now, predating and inspiring many of my other fixations, like getting me into Lackadaisy through Ashley Nichols's Honeycast, which was about 3 years ago now. And that's out as a pilot too. Oh look, that's Michael Kovac again. I bet that's the last animated show on the internet I'll see him in. As a result of this interest, and my own fixation on film and media that caused me to go into governmental debt to study it at uni and get a bachelor's degree in film studies, as well as my fixation on internet voice actors, I've been very happy to see Hazbin into this wonderful new year of ours. Finally, I can't contain my autism enough, and I have to write a review of it. I've tried writing long-form video essays or reviews before, but the DHD part of my ADHD makes it very hard to finish projects, but I have a good feeling about this one. Firstly, I'll go into a little preamble, then I'll go episode by episode and structure my analysis as such. Lore. Here I'll discuss the story of the episode and the greater lore implications. Then, production, in which I will talk about animation, voice acting, and musical numbers. Now, just a warning, this will be a spoiler-heavy review. If you haven't seen it yet, watch the pilot and then the series itself. If you have a family member who has Prime, you can share it either through password sharing or via their family deal, like I have. I'm sure most of you will just pirate it or whatever, but whatever. In the spirit of avoiding claims of piracy, though, and since most streaming services black out your screen when attempting to video share or screen record their content, even though Prime doesn't, I'll be showing not that much in the way of moving images, besides what's publicly available and the occasional snippet from the main series. So it'll mostly be images, text, promotional art. I don't quite know how sensitive YouTube's copyright bots are, but seeing as A24 and Bento Box copyright struck the original Hazbin Hotel pilot on Vibsy's channel, I wouldn't try it. It's back up now, don't worry. With that being said, let's get into the preamble. Preamble. Hazbin Hotel is an adult animation series on Amazon Prime that began life as a little animation project from a simple indie artist called Vivian Medrano or Vivsy Pop. Quite a controversial figure, it seems, but the only real criticisms I can find of her that hold any water are either ancient and have been sincerely apologised for, or are being fueled by unusually strong internet rage over literally nothing. Many people rail against the crass nature of her cartoons, claiming her only form of comedy is swear words and sex jokes, but looking at Hazbin, I'd say this is an issue mostly contained by the Hell of a Boss series, the show's spin-off that's available for free on YouTube. Vivsy has spent years designing these characters and working on the animated pilot with a team of animators, and in 2019 produced the animated pilot that took the world by storm and created a market for lesser-known creators to put out their animated content on YouTube, with semi-professional VAs, and get millions of views, to the point where massive celebrities like Kesha and Norman Reedus are on later projects, even if they don't stay on board for very long. After the major success of the pilot, Viv's little dream of a full series came true when indie film studio A24 bought them out and began production on the show we now have. It's taken years to come out, and with fairly radio silent, no pun intended, creators for a lot of it. Many of us thought that it wouldn't ever come out. Hell of a Boss chugged along heartily in the foreground, though, and drip-fed us enough lore and character to keep us going in the interim. It's great, go watch it. Slowly but surely, Viv and her team built up a cast of actors that I have never heard of. Seriously, usually when a series like this comes out, I know half the cast, but the only ones I know here are Brendan Rogers, Mick Lauer, Keith David, and Alex Brightman. The rest are Broadway stars. My sister has been a drama teacher for years now, and she knew most of the cast, and seemed to be very excited to hear they're all in one place, even if she's not going to watch the show. So they must be good. Now, having watched the show, I can heartily agree. So now the show's out, and everything's great. But what was so good about the pilot that kicked this whole thing off, and how does it tie into the show we have now? The pilot. The plot of the pilot basically outlines the idea behind the show, and the new show kind of runs on the assumption that you've seen the pilot, hence my suggestion to watch it first earlier. While the show tends to have enough crumbs to pick out the greater story, many essential elements are left a bit vague, such as how Alastor fell in with the crew, how Husk and Nifty are related to him, and why the Happy/Hazbin Hotel is even a thing. So the pilot opens with a musical number, outlining our protagonist Charlie's feelings on herself and her motivations for starting the hotel. Now, I never liked that the pilot opens with this number. Literally the first word spoken is a lyric. I'm the sort of person who cringes every time a person starts singing and needs a solid 30 seconds to accept that this is happening and that the song's actually okay and I like it. As such, the lore dump in the opening of the main series actually works better in my opinion. But I also really like the opening number of the pilot more than I like some of the songs in the main show. Plus, it's more character for Charlie than the first 4 episodes of the actual show provide. I always worried Charlie would take a back seat to the more fan-favourite characters like Angel and Alastor. She's more of a present person in the show than in the pilot, even if the pilot characterizes her better. Basically, I mean that she does more stuff in the actual show than in the pilot. Anyway, Charlie sings about how she's always been a screw-up and has been cast aside by her parents and society as a whole. As we open up from the Shadow Puppet intro, we see the aftermath of the main conceit of the show, an extermination. Hazbin Hotel takes place in the Christian afterlife domain of hell itself. Charlie is the only child of Lucifer and Lilith, the founding demons and rulers of hell. While ostensibly a demon, Charlie being born in hell means that she's not inherently evil like those sent to hell. Everyone who isn't born in hell was evil in their mortal lives, while those born there have the capacity for good. We see this in Hell of a Boss. This is one of the main reasons behind her ostracization. Besides the Disney princess attitude and propensity for songs, Charlie is just too nice for hell. Charlie loves hell like Kingpin loves Hell's Kitchen. She sees the flaws as the best parts, and sees the good in people despite them being the worst kinds of sinners and demons that there can be. Heaven, however, hates hell. In the pilot, we learn that overpopulation in hell is a massive problem, and to counterbalance it, heaven sends down an army of angels called exorcists once a year, wielding the only kinds of weapons that can kill demons and sinners for good, and send their souls beyond the afterlife and into nothingness. Otherwise, a mortal wound can just be regenerated. Higher demons are seen hiding out in luxurious towers, watching the results of last night's carnage, having safety in their legions of followers and goons. These are the many overlords of hell, a higher caste than the imps, sinners, and lesser demons. These guys can command legions of souls to defend them from the yearly purge. What we don't see here, or in the main series either, are the sins. 7 evil overlords who are above even the great families of hell. Hell of a Boss shows us the Goetia family, namely Prince Stolas and his father King Paimon, but even these are below the 7 deadly sins like Beelzebub of gluttony and Asmodeus of lust. Above these sins are Lucifer, Lilith, and their daughter Charlie Morningstar, although at this point she was still called Charlie Magni. Charlie laments the fact that no one takes her seriously, despite being the daughter of the devil himself. But she has a plan to change all that, prove her daddy wrong, and get her mother to love her again and come back with the milk, while also saving all the souls that she hates to see dying in the yearly extermination. We cut to Angel Dust, a sinner named Anthony sent to hell in the 30s after dying from a cocaine overdose as part of his mafioso days. He's now the most well-known femboy adult star in all of hell, working under the overlord of the adult film industry and one of the 3 V's that make up hell's media circuit, Valentino. Angel is plying his trade for drug money since he's been clean for 2 weeks and going crazy from withdrawal. This man is Travis. He's apparently important. Some news outlets say that he's being played in the main series by the guy who plays Husk in the pilot, Mick Lauer, but IMDb says otherwise. I think it's implied that he's Angel's movie director in the main series. I don't know why he's so important that many news articles mention him by name. It might be because of who they thought voices him, or it might be because of who actually voices him, Don Riviera. He has absolutely no role in the main series, besides one small cameo in episode 4, and I honestly can't even remember if he speaks. Why were news sites so fixated on this guy? Anyway, while off buying drugs, Angel stumbles onto the scene of carnage being caused by a lesser demon of hell, Serpentius. I call him a lesser demon because he holds himself above the other sinners.
Those other cowardly sinners dare not hinder my territorial takeover.
But he may also be a sinner. I seem to recall something somewhere that he died in the 1800s. Maybe he's just a sinner, I don't know. Serpentius is an inventor, and is using the disarray of the extermination to expand his territory using his inventions, but has come across a rival sinner looking to do much the same. She's called Cherry Bomb. The most we've seen of her after this pilot is the Addict music video, where it's implied that she has an abusive relationship with this guy, who I think was a character design that Viv had a while ago and everyone gets excited over, much like Baxter. Anyway, they fight. Meanwhile, Charlie's being prepped by her girlfriend Vaggie to go live on TV and talk about her life-saving idea. Vaggie and Charlie's relationship is adorable, and it only gets more adorable and complex in the main show. Vaggie knows her paramour far too well, and knows that she works off musical logic. To misquote Sideways and many other musical fans before them, when the emotion becomes too much for talking, you sing. When it becomes too much for singing, you dance. Vaggie knows Charlie will get carried away and start singing about her idea, and it will make her less credible to the cynical sinners of hell. Charlie is much too excited, though, and, oh hey, it's those goat things! They have names? I don't remember them. They show up here and once in the show, actually. Yeah, that's it. I think there's servants of Charlie's family? I don't know. Anyway, the news anchor, Katie Killjoy, is a homophobe and a real... Well, her name's Killjoy, so... She's ready to stomp on Charlie's hopes and dreams like she stomps on the co-anchor Tom Trench's nuts.
You are a lip-dick jackass, Tom.
Or should I say, no dick.
They go live and her idea is fully laid out. She hates the fact that heaven comes out once a year to slaughter her people, so she's come up with a brilliant plan. A hotel in hell, where sinners can go to learn how to be good people, rehabilitate themselves, and maybe go to heaven to escape permanent damnation and possible extermination. Seeing her idea isn't having any sway with the sinners, who are so into the idea of consequence-free sex, drugs, violence, and whatever, that they're okay with the chance of maybe dying for real once a year, she breaks into song. Now, this song is amazing, and the singer does a wonderful job. This sequence shows us fun little cameos of more of Viv's shelved ideas that will maybe come to fruition one day in the main show, as well as a nice little hint of Charlie's more genetic traits. Then Maxwell Atoms comes out. You know, Cartoon Network's Maxwell Atoms. Billy and Mandy Maxwell Atoms. And he says,
Wow! That was shit.
And everyone agrees. All except one person, at least. By the way, this wide shot shows what many people agree to be an old design for Blitz from Hell of a Boss and maybe Luna, too. Cool, huh? Katie then, somewhat rightly, critiques the validity and naivety of the idea, resulting in Charlie to clap back with her first success story. Angel Dust has been clean for 2 weeks now, and has not partaken in any violence, drugs, or sex. Katie Killjoy then gets a breaking news bulletin. Angel Dust, post-sex, is high on coke and killing people with Cherry Bomb. Oops. Charlie's being railed by hell for her stupid idea, and mildly insults Katie. This is enough to spark a bloody battle between the two. Cut to Angel again. Here we find out that Angel and Cherry Bomb are seemingly great friends, and he is helping her out simply for the fun of it, after the long stint of chastity, as well as just hanging out with her as a friend. Here we see some of the best lines in the show.
Oh, harder, Daddy. Son?
This wonderful cross-cut occurs with more amazing jokes, such as Tom randomly being on fire for no reason. Then we cut to this scene of the Hasbinites driving home, where Vaggie chastises Angel for his actions, and he's too narcissistic and obsessed with his image to care. We get more of this dynamic in the main show, but it's more deep than narcissism. We'll see this later in the pilot too. Not a lot that's story relevant happens in this scene, but we do get to see funny interplay between Angel and Vaggie, including Angel's casual racism and misogyny against the lesbianic and Hispanic Vaggie.
Fine, I'll try. Just don't get your taco in a twist, baby.
Was that you trying to be sexist or racist?
Whatever pisses you off more. Is there seriously no liquor in here?
Based. I kid. Extremely unbased, Angel. When they get back to the hotel, we see how much of a dump it is, and Angel makes a joke about it, but seeing how hurt Charlie is at this joke, he reaches for her, and then decides against it. This is the cornerstone of Angel's character arc. This proves that somewhere under his fake persona of sex jokes and swear words is a person who understands emotion and feels guilt over actually hurting someone's feelings. This is a pinnacle moment for me. Then we see Charlie going outside to call her mother. Tom Hardy would be proud. Oh yeah, he was in Helva too.
Struggling. It's objectively cool. Our returning champ is nobody's fool.
Anyway, there's been some debate over this, but the sound that the phone makes when it rings implies that either her mother doesn't pick up and Charlie is talking to an answering machine, or that her number has been disconnected and that she's talking into her phone anyway.
Hey, Mom.
Both are equally sad. All the updates we get on this story in the actual show is that her mother disappeared 7 years ago and no one knows where she is. This scene is purely Charlie's moment to shine. We hear her inner turmoil at the loss of her mother, the abandonment her dad has displayed, and the emotional hit that the failure of the news spot has impacted her with. This is far more characterization than she gets in the main show. It could be, as the main show is going off the viewers have likely seen the pilot angle, that they sidelined Charlie's characterization in the main show, since the pilot is purely her gig, and decided to focus on all the others for the sake of evenness and fan service. Finally she comes inside, but a knock at the door introduces the one demon in hell who was actually interested in her train wreck of a news spot. My favourite character. Alastor. This is the radio demon. We saw him walking the streets earlier, which is odd, considering that in the main show we hear that he's been missing for a long while in hell, just so happens to be walking back into hell and instantly sees the broadcast before anyone notices he's back. Alastor is an elusive figure. While he's an overlord and has all the powers of a demon, many people theorize that he was a sinner who fell to hell around the 20s or 40s. Vaggie tells us in a later scene that he materialized in hell decades ago and already had his immense power. Many little symbols that he's associated with, as well as his references to jambalaya and the bayou scene in the main show, and some inspirations from Princess and the Frog, tend to imply that he was a powerful voodoo shaman in life, and may have retained his powers after death. He was known throughout all of hell for broadcasting his torturous acts through the radio to keep people entertained and in terror, commanding legions of souls through tricksy, genie-like deals that make people indebted to him forever. This is a trick many high-level demons do in the form of contracts, like Angel's boss Valentino. Alastor lets himself in, and begins to tell them that he's very interested in helping out the Happy Hotel, much to the shock of the assembled sinners and demons. Turns out he has no faith in the plan working, and just wants to broadcast the failures and torment of the sinners in the hotel, reality TV style. Angel, despite being in hell longer than Vaggie, and probably landing there around the same time Alastor was coming to power, had never heard of him, so Vaggie tells us all about him. Here we see an interesting little reference to Husk, a character we'll see in a moment, seemingly being a servant of Alastor. Then we get more misogyny and lesbianophobia from Angel.
Well, I don't trust him.
To be fair, do you trust any man? Any men? Men?
Again, unbased, Angel. Go to your room. Vaggie warns Charlie not to make a deal with Alastor, as he's known to be duplicitous. Charlie, despite her obvious naivety, says that she knows how to take care of herself. Just as much, though, Vaggie thinks Alastor will make a mockery of her love's pride and joy. We'll see this play out in episode 1. This isn't really lore relevant, I just find it cute that Vaggie is so worried. and worried just as much about Charlie's happiness and validation as her safety. We also see this fun little sneak peek at Lucifer and Lilith. As far as I'm aware, this was the first time anyone in the fanbase had seen these designs, and unlike many others, they've stayed the same. Alastor tries to trick Charlie into a deal to get the hotel up and running, but she outsmarts him by commanding him to help as the Princess of Hell. While his dismissive fair enough comes off all cool, my headcanon is that he's secretly impressed that this naive little princess just found a way out of cutting a deal. Plus his little eye roll when Charlie mentions his creepy voodoo stuff is amazing. As part of his new job, Alastor tours the facility to get a bead on how much work he'll have to put in. And he has another little misogynistic moment where he's telling Veggie that she'd be prettier if she smiled more. Damn, more women-hating in this pilot than a James Somerton video. Then he comments on the lack of staff and asks Angel what he does, leading to the infamous line that got me into the show, and Alastor's equally infamous reaction.
And what can you do, my effeminate fellow?
I can suck your dick.
Ha! No.
Your loss.
In this moment, as the radio screech reminds me, let me comment a touch on the sound effects. Many of the people who watched commented about the sound effects being a bit too intrusive in the pilot. They were going for an Ed, Edd and Eddy kind of level, but instead they hit Johnny Test levels of obnoxious to some people. I didn't mind it so much, but the new show and Hell of a Boss really does tone it down massively, and it is noticeable. Seeing the lack of workforce as a problem, Alastor calls in a few favours. Firstly, we meet Nifty, the Cycloptic 50-style maid. Unlike his next minion, Husk, we have nothing to go off for her. The new show only makes her more of an enigma. We don't know if she's a lesser demon minion, a sinner suckered into service, or even willingly part of Alastor's games. All that we learn in the pilot is that she's got energy to spare, and that she can't tell the difference between the femme and the boy. Also, she hates a mess. Next we meet Husk, an alcoholic gambler who is pulled out mid-game to help out. Initially he hates this post, and that doesn't change. The only thing that convinces him to stay is cheap booze. Angel Dust immediately finds another man in the room, and his subsenses begin to tingle, possibly detecting Alastor's asexuality, so he latches onto Husk. Alastor then breaks into a song about how this place is doomed, but it's going to be a fun ride. This is where we see all the Princess and the Frog influence I mentioned earlier. It might also be the reason he kind of connected with Charlie in the first place, their love of theatrics. I too love his theatrics, as this song is one of my favourites in the series, Helliver included, only slightly beaten out by You Will Be Okay. He's interrupted by Sir Pentious blasting away poor Nifty with a door. It's okay, in the main series we learn that she really likes this. He seemingly wasn't beaten by Angel and Cherry, and is looking to expand into the edges of hell where the hotel is. He comes across Alastor here and talks about their history, leading into something that becomes a running joke in the series, that Pentious is such a bad villain that Alastor doesn't even remember their fights. That, or he knows how much saying that will upset him and does it just to mess with poor Pentious. Whilst trying to test his mettle against the radio demon, Pentious is thrown around like Angel would be in prison, and Alastor immediately moves on, renaming the hotel to the Hazbin Hotel, and telling the audience to stay tuned. And we did. For 5 years. Production. I won't go into the greater lore implications yet, as they become more important as we get into the main series. What was relevant in the moment has already been mentioned. The songs in this pilot are amazing, and while the first one always makes me skip when I rewatch it, I don't think it would have captivated us nearly as much as it did if it wasn't for it. The same goes for Rocky's poem and Lackadaisy. Like, sure, I skip it on rewatch, but it was iconic when I first saw it. The animation in this pilot is amazing, and the little details, fun little faces and movements, and the overall energy is stunning, and on a level that makes it seem much more professional than it actually is. The VAs are some of the first to really get me into the voice acting scene. I already alluded to the infamously prodigious Michael Kovac as Angel Dust, and his performance, comedic timing, and energy breathe Angel Dust into life. We don't really see much outside of the occasional jokey part of his performance. He doesn't get to do much of the emotional part of Angel Dust's character, but we do see him perform that sort of thing in the Addict music video, which is a very good song, even though Michael Kovac isn't necessarily a singer and is a voice actor first and foremost. His performance on this particular song really does prove that he could have brought the emotional heart to Angel Dust. Ed Bosco as Alastor was amazing, not just because of the effect on his voice, but his captivating performance. I was still making my The Ticking Globe steampunk radio show at the time, and his radio persona really helped me refine my voice for that. He has the energy of a used car dealer or an obnoxious mid-century presenter that you find grating to listen to but just can't stop listening to. Like Nickelback. Seriously, if everyone would just shut up and admit they actually like Nickelback, the world would just be a kinder place. I was at an MCR concert after they released Foundation of Decay, and they played Rockstar beforehand, and the whole stadium's worth of black-drenched and neon emo teens to 30s all sang along. I sang along. Nobody was silent. Admit you like them already and stop being an egotist. Anyway, speaking of this voice cast and music, I'm actively listening to the Thank You and Goodnight song from the pilot cast that came out 3 hours ago as I write this. Damn the feels. Go watch it.
It's not perfect, but we try. We had so much fun, so thank you. We had so much fun, so thank you.
So, back to Alastor. And speaking of Gabe, Gabriel C. Brown did such a good job singing as Alastor that I barely noticed the different voice actors. His energy and frenetic phonographic style is captured in his performance perfectly. Jill Harris and Elsie Lovelock do a great job as Charlie. Real Snow White energy to the crazy vibrato in the singing, and the energy and bounce in the speaking really makes her a wonder to watch. Monica Franco as Vaggie is also a riot. Few people can pull off under-the-breath Spanish cursing quite like her. Her aggressive tone is balanced by her soft-spoken and gentle demeanour, managing to pull off both in one performance. Stamper as Penchas and Joe Gran as the Eggs are a comedic duo made in heaven, and the over-the-top performance really is a joy to behold. Faye Mata pulling out the terrible beehole energy for Katie Killjoy is a hard act to follow. She brings a sterling pointedness to her delivery that, combined with the writing, makes her performance the best kind of train wreck, one where everyone but her is suffering, and you love to see her add fuel to the fire. She's captivatingly evil. She also returned as Glitz and Glam in Helliver, apparently. I had no idea until now. Let's hope it's not typecasting. Josh Tomar as Tom Trench was also a riot, with comedic timing to match the script, and the same used car salesman energy as Alastor, but more lovably insufferable. I love his performance here. Crystal Laporte killed it as Cherry Bomb. She captured that spunky punk chick character through voice alone, and reminded me very hard of some cartoon characters from my youth that influenced my taste today. That brash energy brimming from the performance is infectious. I think I remember this being a pretty tough time for her too, through the next few years especially, so props to her for the stellar performance in spite of all of this, and sticking with the community even to this day. Mick Lauer as Husk was beautifully harsh, able to capture the associated done with this energy that he needed. We didn't get to see him take on the emotional core that the character would represent in the main show, but his performance in other media like JoJo proves to me that he could have pulled it off. I think he was criminally underused in this pilot, and I can say that I'm glad that he's one of the cast members to make it into the final curtain call, even if it's not the same character. Michelle Marie was perfect casting for Nifty, and again, criminally underused. She only had one line in the whole pilot, and that one line was, yes, a several seconds long run-on sentence, but she was amazing. The energy, the tone, the mild psycho vibes were captured perfectly, and I always loved hearing her on the Honeycast doing more of Nifty's voice. Even back when the pilot first came out, they were bringing in big names like Maxwell Atoms of Billy and Mandy fame and Broadway's James Monroe Iglehart, who would go on to play as Modius in Hell of a Boss. The writing in this pilot, too, is tight as can be, and full of humour that isn't just swearing and sex jokes, and even these don't land quite so forcedly as some of the ones in Hell of a Boss occasionally do. Sometimes I think that in Hell of a Boss they let Brandon riff a little bit and he can go a touch overboard, but maybe it's all written and sometimes it just falls flat. The point being that besides that, Hell of a Boss is brilliant, this pilot was stellar, and the main show builds off that foundation. Animation, writing, direction, cleanup, voice talent and sound design is amazing in this pilot, and it only gets more refined as we go on from here. Everyone involved should be proud. I won't cover Hell of a Boss here. Maybe that'll be a future video if we see some of the Sins or Goetians interacting with the characters in the main series and expanding their lore. But for now, I'm treating it as separate because there's no character or story overlap. Even the extermination isn't really mentioned in Hell of a Boss. The novel concept of a rehab center in Hell is amazing, and while some people see it as just a medium to get Viv's character designs out there, what character designs, am I right? They're pretty good. Many people also complain that while there's good queer representation in the show, and many characters and actors of varying racial backgrounds appear, that many of the characters are very thin or brolic, calling the show fat-phobic. I didn't really notice. I don't really see it as a super valid concern, it's just part of the design. Now, in the intervening years, we were drip-fed Hell of a Boss episodes. We were also drip-fed new designs for the Hazbin residents. Many of these designs are great. Charlie and Vaggie look so much more interesting. While the red backgrounds frequently make characters like them blend in, the good smattering of white and the other colours make them visually interesting. Plus, Charlie's red eyes are a fun little touch. When I first saw Alastor's new design, however, I was less thrilled. The only real difference I noticed was a white stripe on his lapels, and that's it. But now I don't really agree with myself. He needed the pop of colour for the reason I just said. As for Angel's and Nifty's new designs, well, Angel got some new gloves, and for a while I thought Nifty barely changed at all, but then I looked closer and noticed her 50s-inspired bell gown replaced by a fun little maid's outfit, which is super cute. For some reason I melded these two designs in my head, and I think it was because we saw so little of her in both versions that I forgot that there was much of a difference. Husk's new design was barely noticeable at first too, but it was more simplistic in the wing area and added black pants with braces. He looks more like a bartender now and actually wears clothing, much to Angel's annoyance, I imagine. I imagine this was mostly for the ease of animation to make these characters more simple. And so we sat and waited, seeing barely any changes in our favourite characters, and only little news to go on until about, 40-something hours ago by now. Episode 1, Overture. Plot. Episode 1 starts with a shadow puppet show retelling the story of creation and the Garden of Eden from Lucifer's point of view, as told by Charlie. This story, as you can imagine, is much more sympathetic to Lucifer's cause, labelling him as a hopeless dreamer who was incorrectly labelled as a troublemaker by heaven and denied access to heaven's creation. When Adam was created in Eden, his first wife, Lilith, created as equal from the same clay, denied being an obedient, mindless wife to Adam, and ran away from the garden into the loving arms of Lucifer. Together they sowed the seeds of knowledge in mankind through Adam's second wife, Eve, and brought with it the curse of sin, allowing evil to enter creation. Unknowingly, it seems, Lilith and Lucifer had created a realm of evil. Hell. They were cast into this pit by heaven, never being allowed to see the goodness in all of creation again, only being allowed to see the evil that was sent to hell. Lucifer lost his ability to dream out of the shame of his actions, and Lilith thrived amongst the demons, inspiring them with song, which we assume is where Charlie gets her gift from. The angels of heaven, not liking how overpopulated hell was becoming, fearing an uprising from the demons, began exterminations. This frames it more as something imposed on hell, rather than a natural factor of it or something that the higher-ups of hell agreed on to keep overpopulation down, which is how I read it in the pilot. Charlie, wanting to do her mother proud, has a responsibility to fight against this oppression, for the people that her mother loved so much. This is her main motivation as given by the series. We then see that the story was being read aloud by Charlie, and Vaggie overheard it. It's been about 5 days since the pilot happened, and even though everyone looks and sounds different, the events still occurred, and hell is cleaning up after the extermination. We also learn that Lilith has been missing for 7 years now. Keep that number in mind. We then cut to a commercial that Alastor made for the hotel, ridiculing it as being a lost cause and inviting people to come anyway, in addition to calling out Charlie's daddy issues for being the main reason that she started the hotel. Vaggie expresses her distaste at this blatant disregard for Charlie's vision, while Charlie is characteristically more light-footed about her criticism. This is what I mentioned before about Vaggie not liking Alastor's tone when it came to her boo's idea of rehab. Alastor blames his lack of ability on having to use a TV like Charlie requested, and that he's a bit out of practice. Angel suggests a bawdy commercial with him as the star, suggesting Alastor be his co-star, which he roundly rejects because Alastor is asexual. Do I need to say it a third time, shippers? He's ace! Vaggie railing against the booze in the bar in the pilot is an interesting counterpoint to her staying more quiet about Angel's idea in the main show. While she's against it in the show, she doesn't shout about it like the alcohol in the pilot, and lets Charlie let him down softly, thanking him for his special skills, but that they don't want to exploit Angel. This links with Charlie and Angel's relationship in episode 4. In the midst of Angel...
I got the arms, I got the stamina, I got the legs, I got the lung capacity. I got the legs!
being Angel, Lucifer calls Charlie. This is big, as even though we don't see or hear him, this is the first time we've seen any interaction between him and his daughter. Suddenly, as Angel asks why Alastor can't force people to stay at the hotel, Husk makes himself known, letting us know that that's why he's here. Nifty,
if he wasn't forcing me,
I like being forced.
keep that to yourself, Nev.
continues being Nifty. Angel keeps ragging on the idea of the hotel, but accepts the free room so he can save his money for crack. This is also mentioned in the pilot that the only reason he went there in the first place is the no-rent room away from Val. Charlie calls Vaggie over excitedly, and we see Vaggie smile at her enthusiasm. Aww. Charlie explains that Lucifer wants her to attend a meeting with Adam, the leader of the exterminating angels, in his place. While Vaggie is confused about why the meeting is happening in the first place, Charlie breaks out into our first song. This is the beginning of a problem I have with the series as a whole, but this is one of the least bad examples, so we'll get into it when we hit the more egregious examples. Before Vaggie can convince Charlie to calm down at the opportunity to win the angels over with her plan of the Redemption Hotel, and especially not to sing for them, Charlie's already on her way, singing. We get to see a lot more of Hell in this one song than we see in all of Hell of a Boss. The closest we got were the aerial shots of Greed in the episode with Crimson, and the shots that we see when we next see Crimson stealing away Fizz and Blitz. Specifically, I think this is the Wrath Ring, or Pride, one of the two. I'm just now noticing that while Hazbin has a predominantly red backdrop, each ring has a different colour, with Greed being green like money, and Lust being purple like a sultry night under the stars. That's Travis again! What the Charlie makes her way into the Heaven Embassy to meet with Adam, and after being the first man, it seems, he was promoted to the leader of the Exterminators. Now Charlie realises why her dad made her come instead of him, since Lucifer married Adam's first wife. That would be rather awkward. Intercut with this segment, we see Vaggie trying to remake the commercial to match Charlie's vision. There's that theme again. She tries, but fails, as Angel is too adult, Husk can't memorize his lines, and Nifty is...
Got it! I'm ready! Action!
Nifty. This is what I was meaning by we see a little more of her, but it doesn't clarify anything. Just wait until episode 3. In her desperation, she makes a low-tier deal with Alastor, where he doesn't have to get involved with TV ever again if he helps them make an actually good advert. Adam really acts like a man who would force a woman to be subservient to him, so no wonder Lilith ran off. Charlie takes his BS like a champ and tries fighting for the rights of Hell's population by arguing that they're still human souls. The angel accompanying Adam, Lute, gets upset that Charlie compares sinners in hell to denizens of heaven, and says that sinners make mistakes while angels don't. Charlie misses 2 good opportunities to mention Lucifer and Adam himself here, both of whom made mistakes. You know, original sin and all that. Lute then goes on to play off Charlie's insecurities about being worthless by calling her father and her worthless by extension. I don't quite get the logic here, because Lucifer and Lilith were supposed to be executed instead of be exiled, that makes them worthless? Or is the implication that Lucifer had to make a deal to save them, so they're calling him a coward? Either way, it really gets to Charlie. As their time is nearly up, Charlie breaks into song, summing up her idea poorly, and annoying Adam, who combats her in song by pointing out that not only do sinners deserve hell, torment, and the eventual extermination, but that the angels would have no fun if it weren't for the killing. We even see Charlie's demon form coming out a bit here. Ooh. And then he drops the bomb that, because of her actions, they're moving extermination up this year, and the angels will be back in 6 months rather than 1 year. Okay. Returning to the hotel, Charlie dodges Vaggy's questions, and Vaggy sits her down to watch the new ad to cheer her up. She nearly breaks into tears at the thought of everyone banding together to do it right this time, which is why Vaggy did it. Aww. 666 News breaking bulletin, much to everyone's impatience, seeing another flash of angry Charlie. Katie Killjoy, tells the world that they only have 6 months left to live in the afterlife. In the skies over hell, an angel's ship scans something. A dead angel. The real reason behind the new deadline is to keep the demons in the dark about the fact that the angels can be killed, whilst coming back soon enough to wipe all of hell off the map in revenge. God damn. That's episode 1. Damn, a lot of lore implications here. Firstly, angels can die, and someone in hell did it. Secondly, Adam, despite being just as crass and evil as the demons we see, and specifically saying that hell is more his vibe than heaven, is an angel, and didn't go to hell for his original sin. Also, Charlie's demon form seems to be tied to anger and other strong emotions. There's some not extremely significant details that are still fun, like Alastor not showing up properly on cameras as he has a face for radio, which is consistent in later episodes, and eventually on their ad, which I only saw on my third watch. We also see just how good Alastor is at manipulating people with his deal with Vaggy. There was a theory going around that his radio effect drops out when he's more sincere, and that still works in the new series, not just the pilot.
I want to watch the scum of the world struggle to climb up the hill of betterment, only to repeatedly trip and tumble down to the fiery pit of failure.
Charlie can come back to absolutely nothing. Your choice.
We also see this on Vox in our next episode. These are all the main lore implications in this episode. We see a lot more in the next few. Production. Animation has improved since the last time, and while it's cleaner, it's also more simplistic and has a few odd cut corners here and there. My main animation gripe is in episode 4, but Adam just absorbing this rib while he eats them normally later is odd. Also, Adam eating ribs, because Eve was made of a rib, I get it. Lip sync is also sometimes strange, but I've seen worse, and it's still mostly unnoticeable. The songs are great, and the two in this episode being the same song with different tones and implications is a very good touch. It's one of the best songs in the franchise, and while the first one has that problem I'll get to, the second one doesn't. Little character details, emotions, facial expressions are just as good as in the pilot, with the exception of Alastor standing still as a statue while Angel comes onto him, which surely would make him at least make a slightly different face as Angel talks, before he finishes. But he only moves once Angel stops talking. Maybe it's the whole smile all the time thing? I don't know. The amount of detail in the exterior shots of hell is breathtaking, and while some of the jokes in this song do kind of fall flat, they're usually quick, painless, and followed up rather smartly or in a funny way. As for the voice work, for a cast I knew nothing about, I expected good things already. You don't get on Broadway without knowing how to take direction, line up with the expectations of a character that already exists, and have a good work ethic. Like 500 shows a week kind of work ethic, I was not disappointed. Erica Henningsen does a great job capturing the same energy as both previous performers of Charlie while making it her own. She even does the same little vocal thing Charlie did in the pilot in a later episode. I'll put it up here.
Sorry, I'm just so excited to have our first real guest.
Fine, but I have these other ideas of what to say.
The highlighted bits are the best parts.
Her singing voice is amazing, and had less of a Snow White vibrato and more of a modern Disney princess vibe. Vaggy's VA, Brooklyn Nine-Nine's own Stephanie Beatriz, knows a thing or two about capturing the Disney style, having played the lead role in Encanto. She captures the same world-weary persona that Vaggy had in the pilot, but I can't help imagining her in a leather jacket behind a police desk. She brings the same energy that Monica Franco did, and has a singing voice not yet seen in the pilot for direct comparison. Her singing is great here, and gets better in later episodes when she's singing less trying to calmly dissuade Charlie from being too enthusiastic, and more belting out about protecting those she loves, so no wonder it's better. Blake Roman as Angel Dust carries the same energy Kovac did, but brings a touch more of the Broadway flair in his campy sass. His singing voice, which we get later in future episodes, is much more suited to the role than Kovac was as a singer, which makes sense since he's a Broadway singer and Mike's a voice actor first. We'll see his lyrical bombast later in episode 4, twice. Amir Talai as Alastor is amazing. When I first saw the trailers, I thought he sounded a bit uncanny. Like, recognizable, but just off. Like an impression, almost. Now that I see his more sly, sardonic, and wicked performance, I think I prefer this one to Bosco. And that's saying something, because I love Bosco's performance to death. But Ed is able to capture the radio announcer shtick perfectly, while Talai is able to put that radio personality into a beguiling demonic presence. Both do the intimidation part amazingly, don't get me wrong, but Talai has a knack for everyday mischief that we didn't get to see from Bosco. Every moment written for Ed in the script of the pilot was a performance, whereas now we see Alastor in his everyday slacks. His singing in later episodes captures that same wry cunning and charm mentioned before, but is capable of bringing a whole new level of bestial brutality to his performance, and bringing out a whole new side we've only seen teased. I'll mention it in the next episode. Keith David as Husk. It took me a few episodes to get settled with him. Don't get me wrong, you can never go awry when you have Spawn on the team. This is the second time Mr. David has worked for Hell under a hired demon, swapping Malboja for Alastor, but his voice was so different from the pilot, it shouldn't be at first. I have been watching a lot of Mortal Kombat and Injustice shorts on YouTube recently, and I can only hear Husk as Spawn.
I'll tear off your fingers one by one.
Now, what would you want to go and do that for?
So I can shove them down your throat. Call me Whiskers again and I'll jam that bottle down your throat.
He's just as surly and swearing, and brings a wonderfully irascible, world-weary heaviness to his voice without the gravelly scratch of Lauer. We'll see Keith shine much later on, but slowly and surely I become more comfortable with him in the role. I'll be singing his praises by episode 4, don't worry. Alex Brightman kills it, as always. His vocal performance as Adam captures a sort of energy that makes me want to punch a man I love so dearly. It takes a lot for me to hate someone, but Brightman brings the energy hard, and his vocal performance while singing brings the kind of energy to life that I just mentioned, but with a confidence and flair that I wasn't expecting out of the Angels. I actually didn't really like Adam's design all that much when I first saw him in the promo art. I thought he was kind of try-hardy. I thought he was going to be a bit of a mediocre character, but Brightman brings the same energy, try-hardness, which makes Adam come off as someone with something to prove and something to compensate for, which makes him a lot more interesting and fun than I initially thought just from looking at the design. Kimiko Glenn as Nifty is a wonderful cast. I wish I could somehow have both actors as this character. They're both perfect casting. As much as I like Michelle, however, I can't imagine her doing the more surprisingly lewd and aggressive elements of Nifty as well as Glenn does. Michelle brought a snippet of that psycho energy, but Kimiko gets time to shine that Michelle didn't, and as a result has a leg up, I think. Unfortunately, that's the tiebreaker, that we see more of Kimiko's Nifty by a fraction. I'll still have those honey casts, I suppose. Jessica Vosk as Lute first hit me as a strange performance. She seemed more like an additional voices kind of role, where she came in, barked at Adam her kill can, and then stepped back. But watching her get worked up over Charlie's perceived insult, and stalking towards her with that murderously cutthroat voice seeping out like the most evil atmosphere of all time, was stunning. She captured the murderous and superior nature of this exterminator with skill and grace that I didn't expect upon hearing the first line. Brandon Rogers as Katie Killjoy is probably going to be an acquired taste for me. I'm so used to Katie's other voice, and out of all of the other episodes we have so far, this is all that we hear of her. She doesn't get much time to shine at all, and the time that she does get is just exposition with some expletives thrown in. I wish Brandon had more time to let his talent shine through with her, but I just can't give an opinion yet. I think he also voiced Tom Trench, which is a little distracting, but it was only the one line. Again, I couldn't get a read on his performance for Tom, so I guess we'll have to wait. All of the other ensemble voices in the singing chorus are great, and add a wonderfully crass charm and humour to their lines that I loved. Writing in this episode is still diamond-tipped sharp. with no real wasted time, and with the wonderful contrast of Charlie suffering through Adam's misogynistic spiel while Vaggie coordinates the troops, something she'll do more of in episode 3. Dialogue was wonderfully witty and crass in equal measure, with cutting insults and fun japes alongside the foundation for a lot of character arcs that we'll come to see. These are namely, Angel leaning into his persona, Nifty being a little psycho, Vaggie needing to look after Charlie for her life to mean something to her, Charlie having a lot of baggage from her parents, and yet we don't see much of Husk's foundational arc here. But as it comes in more, I begin to find it one of my favourites. The sort of three-dimensional spinning shots and blocking were also incredibly competent, and the transitions between some of the scenes were also wonderful too. This episode on the whole is in an odd spot, feeling like it's setting up a lot, but since the pilot did most of that heavy lifting, the series sort of lets that lie as it does, and uses that space to flex its strengths and captivate us right out the gate. On to episode 2.